Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, issued a statement in tribute to his mother. He said, "Your Majesty, it has been an honor and privilege to serve you."
Have you ever wondered what final words or secrets the longest reigning British monarch might have left behind? Secrets that could forever change the balance of the royal family? Today, we'll delve into a moment of extraordinary consequence. The reading of Queen Elizabeth's last will, the hush that fell over Buckingham Palace, the unspoken tension in every corner, and the unexpected responsibility entrusted to Prince Andrew all point to a narrative as gripping as any royal drama. Stay with me as we unravel the surprising bequests, the silent disagreements, and the powerful messages that echo in every word of this final testament. Buckingham Palace buzzed with a strange, subdued energy when the royal family gathered in its austere drawing room. The walls themselves seemed to watch in anticipation, the centuries of history embedded in them merging with the gravity of the present moment. Prince Andrew stood near an ornate table with the sealed document that everyone had come to hear. No one quite knew why he, rather than King Charles, had been chosen for this daunting responsibility. The answer lay hidden under the wax seal, which bore the unmistakable mark of Queen Elizabeth II. Andrew's face betrayed a blend of apprehension and pride. He appeared keenly aware that his mother's last words, once read aloud, could alter the trajectory not just of the monarchy, but of every life in the room. Princess Anne stood to one side, her expression dignified as ever, her posture giving nothing away. King Charles sat in a tall-backed chair, his eyes fixed on Andrew, in the manner of someone who expected this role for himself and couldn't quite articulate why it had been taken away. Prince William, near Catherine, exchanged uneasy glances. There was a sense that the final distribution of property, titles, and guidance could ripple into future generations of royals. When Andrew finally broke the seal, every breath seemed to catch. "This is my last will," he read. A whisper of awe passed through the air, almost as if the Queen had spoken. The first lines were polite and gracious, full of thanks and recognition. Yet beneath that cordial veneer, the words began to signal new directions. To Charles, she entrusted Windsor Castle, a decision that seemed only natural. The eldest child, groomed for the throne his entire life, sat in solemn acceptance. He gave the slightest nod in acknowledgement, a gesture that to outsiders might have seemed routine, but to those who knew him, spoke volumes about his love for tradition. Then Andrew continued, his voice trembling slightly as he reached the next bequest. "I have given Sandringham estate to my daughter Anne." Heads turned in surprise. Sandringham, so closely associated with the reigning monarch, would now belong to Anne. She blinked, visibly taken aback, while Charles's expression changed, if only for a moment. The slightest tightening of his jaw indicated that this was an unexpected curve. Sandringham represented a symbol of continuity in the monarchy's lineage, an inheritance that many, including Charles, had presumed he would receive. Yet, there it was in writing. Sandringham was Anne's. A ripple of tension passed across the room, though no one dared speak. The reading had only just begun, and already centuries of tradition were shifting. Andrew pressed on, revealing that Balmoral, another cornerstone of the royal family's personal identity, would not be bestowed on a single individual. Instead, Queen Elizabeth decreed it be shared among multiple members of the family. This decision broke with an age-old practice, whereby the sitting monarch would hold such estates exclusively. The silence grew thick. Charles's gaze lowered just enough to betray his discomfort. The concept of sharing Balmoral with others clashed with his expectations, and the entire royal entourage could sense a deeper undercurrent of frustration. As Andrew proceeded, the personal nature of the Queen's gifts and intentions became clear. She offered items not just to the older generation, but also to the younger royals, tying them to the monarchy's storied past through meaningful objects. To Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, she bequeathed the Vladimir tiara, describing it in the will as a symbol of grace and continuation. Catherine's eyes fluttered in gratitude. She recognized the magnitude of this inheritance. That tiara, so steeped in royal history, now represented the future of the crown, the bridging of tradition and modernity through her role. Pausing to glance around, Andrew then spoke Harry's name. Immediately, a flicker of tension returned, as though an electric current had sparked in the atmosphere. "I leave a ceremonial sword that once belonged to King George II, Andrew recited. In that room, the mention of Harry triggered a complex emotional reaction. On one hand, he remained part of the family. On the other, his decision to step away from royal duties and relocate to the United States with Meghan Markle had stirred waves of controversy. William's disquiet was apparent as soon as the words escaped Andrew's lips. The sword was no trivial heirloom. It symbolized a lineage of power and service to the crown, and leaving it to Harry seemed to carry unspoken messages about loyalty, legacy, and redemption. This unexpected bequest caused a further surge of unease in Charles, who managed to maintain his outward composure but was clearly unsettled. In a monarchy that thrives on tradition, bestowing such a potent symbol on a son who had distanced himself from royal life created dissonance. Harry's name hung in the air like a note that refused to resolve, stirring guarded glances and silent speculation. Andrew's reading then turned to the newest generation, whose place in the monarchy was still evolving. To Prince George and Princess Charlotte, the Queen granted both physical treasures and intangible knowledge. George, already third in line to the throne, would one day shoulder the same weight Charles had carried. The Queen's words reminded him, and everyone present, that his future role extended far beyond wearing a crown. Charlotte, too, was recognized. A strong sense of equality and shared responsibility ran through the Queen's instructions, as if she intended to modernize the monarchy from beyond the grave by placing emphasis on every child's importance. Finally, Andrew moved to the youngest, Prince Louis, who received a handwritten letter from the Queen. This seemingly simple gesture resonated with deeper meaning. In a family where centuries of tradition can sometimes overshadow individual voices, a personal letter spoke volumes. It offered a pathway for guidance and reflection, something Louis could revisit when old enough to comprehend the scope of his heritage. A weighted pause filled the drawing room as Andrew set aside the final page. No one stirred. A swirl of emotions covered every face, from Anne's stoic acceptance of her new responsibilities to William's conflicted thoughts about Harry's sword, to Charles's unsettled realization that he would now share Balmoral and forfeit Sandringham. Even Andrew, whose own controversies had distanced him from the spotlight, appeared to wrestle with his new role in the monarchy's unfolding chapter. Then Andrew continued to speak. The Queen's last paragraph outlined her fervent wish for harmony amidst upheaval. She called for unity, resilience, and compassion, for the family to support each other in times of crisis instead of splintering. Her desire was more than a final request. It was a directive. For a moment, even Charles, who had seemed so perturbed, visibly softened. The monarchy's future needed them to stand together, not as individuals clinging to tradition, but as a collective entity willing to adapt without losing its core essence. The hush that followed was no longer thick with tension, but something else: reflection. Charles was the first to speak, acknowledging the Queen's instructions and recognizing the gravity of what was asked. He spoke of the monarchy's evolving role in modern society, hinting that times had changed, and so must they if they hoped to remain meaningful stewards of a centuries-old institution. His words, delivered softly yet firmly, signaled a tentative acceptance of the bequests. Still, a trace of regret remained in his eyes, as though mourning the version of the future he had long envisioned. Anne, with Sandringham now under her watch, thanked her mother's memory in her own measured way. She rarely displayed her inner thoughts, but the moment revealed a subtle sense of honor and determination. She knew this was about preserving more than just a house. It was about keeping alive the heart of the monarchy. She nodded at Andrew, indicating her readiness to uphold her mother's wishes without fanfare. William and Catherine maintained a quiet presence throughout this final summation. William glanced toward Andrew, acknowledging the reading of that second part of the will, a part that circled back to Harry and the significance of that ceremonial sword. Tension had flared at the mention of it, but now William appeared introspective, perhaps even resigned to the complexities of sibling relationships. Catherine, ever poised, said little but kept a supportive hand near William, as if to confirm her solidarity no matter what storms lay ahead. The Vladimir tiara sparkled in the back of her mind, an object that fused past traditions with a sense of her future place at William's side. The culminating lines of the Queen's will urged them all to embrace transformation. She reminded them that the monarchy's true power lay in its capacity to connect with people, to embody service rather than control. Her message emphasized the intangible aspects of rulership: empathy, unity, and evolving with the times. That call resonated differently in each listener, but it was undeniably a focal point. In that moment, Prince Andrew glanced towards Charles. There was a palpable shift in the room's mood. Old disagreements seemed trivial in the face of the Queen's final directive. The monarchy would only survive if they chose to meet on common ground, forging solidarity even when personal ambitions clashed. Andrew folded the last page, setting it gently onto the table. The scraping of chair legs and the soft rustle of clothing signaled that the reading was complete. No immediate disagreements broke the stillness that followed. The younger royals, from George to Charlotte to Louis, were absent from this gathering, but not absent from the conversation. Their futures were etched into those pages, shaping responsibilities they wouldn't fully understand for years to come. The Queen's last testament had set them on paths that demanded both reverence for tradition and a willingness to adapt to shifting cultural landscapes. Charles inhaled, breaking the silence. He offered words of closure, stating that they must honor their mother by striving toward the unity she envisioned. He also reiterated that the monarchy had stood for centuries because it recognized the need to reconcile old values with modern realities. He urged them to remember that, from the outside, the monarchy was seen as a single institution, and internal divisions could weaken public faith in the crown's stability. With that, the room slowly began to disperse. Some retreated to more private spaces within the palace. Others ventured into the corridors to process this wave of new responsibilities and revelations. Andrew lingered a moment longer, his eyes resting on the sealed wax remnants on the table. One could almost sense that he, too, needed time to let go of the tension coiled within him. The Queen's final instructions had placed him in a position of unexpected importance. He had delivered her words. Now, he had to live by them as well. Anne approached the table where the will lay, her hand resting on it gently. She was known for her understated stoicism, yet in that gesture, one could read both reverence for her mother and acceptance of the road ahead. Unlike Charles, who bore the weight of the crown, she occupied a less scrutinized position, though no less important now, having received Sandringham. She believed in doing her duty with little fanfare, a stance the Queen had likely admired. Outside the palace windows, the late afternoon light was shifting across the meticulously kept lawns, painting them in shades of gold. Life in London went on. Taxis rattled through the streets. Tourists gathered at gates, snapping photos and sharing curiosities. Few realized what a pivotal moment was transpiring within those historic walls. Over time, the decisions laid out in the Queen's will would filter through official announcements, media scrutiny, and public debate. But in this sacred, private hour, the will's significance was a matter of personal reflection for each family member. Questions lingered about Harry's role. Would the ceremonial sword draw him back into the family's sphere of influence, or was it merely a final gesture from a grandmother trying to keep him tied to his heritage? William would have to reckon with feelings of betrayal and protectiveness, while Catherine, newly endowed with the Vladimir tiara, would become an increasingly visible figurehead for a monarchy in flux. Charles was left to reconcile his new reality, which included sharing Balmoral and understanding that Anne now held Sandringham. Perhaps in time, he would see these decisions as a wise attempt by the Queen to modernize the institution. In corners of the palace, hushed conversations had already begun. Some staff and courtiers whispered about what these changes meant for titles, responsibilities, and the future shape of the monarchy's public image. The monarchy had become a global focal point, scrutinized like never before. Divisions, if left unresolved, would be magnified on the world stage, overshadowing any attempts at highlighting the monarchy's charitable works or diplomatic roles. Yet, if the family could harness unity, they might emerge stronger, proving that even centuries-old traditions can bend without breaking. In the end, the Queen's central message resonated above the specifics of inheritance. The monarchy is a living entity, shaped and reshaped by each generation's approach to leadership and service. She had looked beyond the immediate future, setting forth directives that encouraged evolution without sacrificing the lineage's identity. It was a delicate balance that required humility, adaptability, and an unshakable commitment to duty, qualities she had embodied during her 70-year reign. Those who read or heard the will might argue that the moment had a haunting quality. The Queen, physically absent, continued to exert considerable influence from the grave, orchestrating the monarchy's direction as if anticipating the struggles that might unfold. In bequeathing certain estates to unexpected individuals or assigning powerful symbols to those who had strayed, she illustrated the nuance of her leadership style: firm, yet compassionate, tradition-bound, yet forward-thinking. Queen Elizabeth's will, read aloud by Andrew, seemed to carry her voice from beyond the grave and shape the future of the monarchy in surprising ways. Some estates went to people who weren't expected to receive them, and the Queen made sure to give important symbols to those who had drifted from their duties. Andrew's role as reader was a twist that raised questions about whether it was his chance at redemption or a final act of trust from his mother. Charles received Windsor Castle, a weighty responsibility he had been preparing for, but he also sensed how her words might either guide or challenge his reign. The mood in the palace was a mix of gratitude, uncertainty, and respect for the Queen's foresight, while Anne quietly placed the will back in its sleeve, aware that the Queen's instructions would echo for a long time to come. The will's closing message stressed that the monarchy must look forward, not just cling to old customs. By focusing on unity and renewed roles, the Queen reminded everyone that the future of the crown depends on cooperation and being open to change. Even as the day wound down and the family members left the drawing room, they carried a sense of optimism that these final instructions might help them move beyond old rifts. Through her parting words, the Queen showed that the royal family's strength lies not only in titles or property, but in their ability to evolve and serve with sincerity. Thank you for watching and being part of this unraveling of Queen Elizabeth's final testament. What do you make of these surprising inheritance details, and how do you think that they'll shape the monarchy in years to come? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and spread the word if you found this exploration insightful. Until next time.